Were you also being paid by PricewaterhouseCoopers on the same day that you were being paid by the Government of Canada?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back at the Standing Committee for Public Accounts, where former President John Ossowski of the Canada Border Services Agency returns to testify about ARRIVESCAM. It was very obvious that he did not want to be there. It was just as obvious that the Conservatives were not interested in whether he wanted to be there or not. They just wanted the truth.
Let's take a look.
Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Ossowski, you were the president of the Canada Border Service Agency, is that correct? And how are you employed now?
I work with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
And what's your position with PricewaterhouseCoopers?
My classification is a managing director, but I'm a senior strategic advisor.
And as a senior strategic advisor, are you aware of how much business your firm does with the Government of Canada?
Yes.
And how much business is that?
I don't have those numbers with me today.
Okay. Would you care to offer an estimation of how much business it is?
That's corporate information that I'm not privy to share.
You're not privy to share?
Well, I'm privy to, but I'm not in a position to share. That's something for the firm to respond to that question.
So the value of contracts between your firm and the Government of Canada is not something that you're prepared to share with us?
That's not my information to share. That's the firm's information.
Sorry, I think it's germane, but we're going to circle back to it. We know that PricewaterhouseCoopers does significant business with the Government of Canada and formerly did business with the agency that you were the head of, the CBSA. You talked about taking a casual employment with the CBSA so that you could access information while you were concurrently working in a senior strategic advisory role for PricewaterhouseCoopers, a firm that does significant business with the Government of Canada, an amount so great and so sensitive you're not even prepared to disclose it to the committee today. Did you have any restraints put on you on the information that you were able to access when you were employed by the current president of the CBSA in preparation for your testimony before a parliamentary committee?
Excellent question. A couple of excellent points that were in there. So, number one, Ossowski says that he is aware of the amounts of business and the contracts that PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC as they're commonly known, has with the Government of Canada. Okay, how much is that? Oh, I can't tell you that. Now,
again, that's very bizarre.
Well, and yeah, this is the thing. So imagine, just imagine this, so you're a client of a company and one of their representatives comes to talk to you and you ask them, how much business is your company doing with me? I'm not at liberty to say.
I suppose that's true because this is a government committee
It's the Government of
inquiring
Canada.
about a government agency and their contracts with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
It's kind of beyond ridiculous. So that's number one. Number two is that the real important question is, did you have any restrictions put on you by Aaron O'Gorman when you were quote unquote hired as a casual employee? And the answer should have been yes, right? Because there's going to be certain information that he shouldn't need access to. What information would that be? Well, here's the thing. What should have happened is he should have came to Aaron O'Gorman with a scope of what he needs access to. And then Aaron O'Gorman should have said, okay, fine, we're going to limit your access to that information, or we will have somebody get that for you. That's what should have happened. What did happen? I guess we'll find out.
The letter of offer that was offered to me and I signed had conflict of interest provisions in it. I have access to my email on my calendar. and other documents associated with events in the emails and the calendar.
So to be clear,
and
the events,
if I may finish,
the events
and I
that
recuse myself from all work with CBSA while at public work, PwC.
Yeah, we've seen the record of the CBSA under your leadership on conflicts of interest. We heard testimony from CBSA officials about boozy dinners with contractors that were working for the CBSA. So you'll have to excuse me if I don't put great stock in the seriousness with which you viewed the conflict of interest requirements that you said you would follow. You said that you had access to any documents related to items in your calendar and email. Well, as the president of the CBSA, I'd imagine that would be pretty significant. And working for a firm that hired the former head of the CBSA, having previously done business with the CBSA, and doing excess of tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in business with the government of Canada, it seems that there would be a commercial advantage to having their senior advisor, an executive with this firm, to have access to all of their information from their calendar, emails, and associated documents when you were given that employment by Ms. O'Gorman. What date were you given access to the CBSA?
I don't recall the specific date. It was sometime in January, initially to prepare for my January 18th, and then it was restarted again in February.
Can you please furnish this committee with the assigned offer of employment?
I believe that's in the possession of the agency. I don't have a copy of myself.
What? Why don't you have a copy of your own letter of employment? Your signed offer letter. You didn't keep your signed offer letter? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I think as an executive, he would know that's something very important that you should keep.
Yeah. What? That makes no sense that he doesn't. Okay, remember, folks, when we say if you lie about the little things, how can we believe you on the big things? That makes no sense whatsoever. So what he's saying, because letters of employment, like offer letters, are
contracts essentially
are passed through email, and then you will either electronically sign them or you will print them out, scan them, and send them back.
Yeah, they don't really do it the old school way anymore, where they sit you down at a desk and present you with a piece of paper.
No. So what you're saying? You received your offer letter, you signed it, scanned it, if that was the case, and then destroyed it after you emailed it to them, or you received it, you digitally signed it, sent it back, and then deleted it from your mailbox. That doesn't sound correct.
You don't have a copy of any of the employment documents, so you took a job with the CBSA and didn't keep a copy?
I'll look for it, but I think you're better off to get that from the agency. They would have a record of that.
Well, if you have it, I would be best to get it from you because we've asked for it from you.
I will look for it, and if I have it, I will certainly provide it.
Thank you. You still have 2 minutes. Pardon me, I was acknowledging the witness. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks very much. You were paid for your casual employment to access the documents in preparation for your testimony. That's correct?
I was asked to submit hours for my preparation, and I submitted 1 day.
And how much were you paid?
It was roughly $500.
So you were paid $500 to get access to internal files and documents, which I think I've already articulated is a highly questionable decision, and certainly raises ethical questions when based on your current employment and based on your employer's interest in the commercially sensitive information at the CBSA. Do you have a list of all of the documents, or are you still in possession of the documents that you retrieved in preparation for your committee appearance?
Mr. Chair, the one document that I was actually provided with, besides looking at my emails and calendars, was the ATIP that was provided to OGO, which is several hundred pages long, and I did not even look at it. I know that you asked Ms. O'Gorman for the forensics of what I've touched when I'm in there, and I'll leave it up to them to provide that information to you. I think you'll find it fairly underwhelming.
What a snippy response. What documents did you provide? Well, ask the CBSA. That's basically what he's saying. This guy, he is so unlikable.
Yeah, he's very cold.
He's cold. He's flippant. You can tell he has no business being here, or doesn't want to be here. And we paid him. Like, I still can't get around that. We paid him.
I don't understand why he's permitted to put in for a day's work, as he says, to the taxpayer through the CBSA for reimbursement. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and just so everyone understands what we paid him, we paid him $62.50 an hour, and that works out to, roughly $125,000 a year. That's the prorated rate. So $62.50 an hour to refresh his memory in order to come to committee. It's an easy $500 on the taxpayer dime.
I find it very interesting because the president of the CBSA said that you had access to any of the documents that you would have had access to as president of the CBSA.
While that may be the case, I did not access anything or take it with any advantage that would put me in any conflict of interest.
Yeah, I can't take it at face value, the seriousness with which you've approached the conflict of interest document that you signed, knowing the casual relationship with avoidance of a conflict of interest that your department had under your leadership. I mean, what better way for a big consulting firm to drum up new business with the CBSA when they've been cutting big checks with very little accountability than to have their former president, now employee, being able to get access to all of the documents that he had while working as the head of that
Mr.
agency.
Chair, I feel compelled to respond to this.
I'll allow it. Go ahead, yes.
Thank you. Given all that's gone on for this ARRIVESCAM discussion over the last couple of years, do you really believe that I would further put myself into jeopardy by pursuing something that had some conflict of interest?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take that question as rhetorical. Thank you.
So I do agree with Mr. Ossowski. This would be very dumb to do, considering the attention that the ARRIVESCAM investigation has on it. I agree with him. It would be pretty dumb for him to put himself at further risk of that. But I don't understand why a request, like, he could have submitted an ATIP request for the information that he needed. And then that would have just been provided through the ATIP process. And he wouldn't have needed to get access to anything inside of the government. He wouldn't have needed to get paid by the government.
Yeah, there's something about this whole situation that's just not adding up.
I don't understand it. What I would be doing, this just crossed my mind. What I would be doing if I were these guys is I'd be saying, hey, CBSA IT, while John Ossowski had access, did he delete anything?
Can they see that?
They can see when items were potentially deleted from his mailbox.
Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Current CBSA President O'Gorman and suspended or on medical leave Min Doan, a senior executive at CBSA, have been caught repeatedly lying to this committee and other committees. In fact, the RCMP are investigating currently Min Doan's allegations that he deleted purposely tens of thousands of emails over a 4-year period. Are you aware of that, sir?
I'm aware of what's been said at committee about this, but I have no other details.
Right. And did you ever engage in that type of activity when you had access to your own emails after leaving the agency? Did you delete some of your emails?
Mr. Chair, I've always honored whatever information management, document management principles that were imposed on me by the government. So no, I have not inappropriately deleted any emails.
Thank you. Any and all emails relating to your communications with Min Doan or your communications with GC Strategies or anything in relation to the ARRIVESCAM or Bottler AI would be preserved at the CBSA. Is that what you're saying, sir?
Mr. Chair, I've reviewed my emails, and I have no evidence that anything has been changed or removed from what I remember.
Thank you. Now let's end this speculation once and for all. There's fairly clear evidence on the record at this committee and other committees that it was in fact Min Doan who finally made the decision to select GC Strategies. Do you agree with that?
I would go back to Mr. Dewan's testimony, Mr. Chair, and he said he was offered a technical decision.
Sir, Mr. Dewan's testimony is rife with inconsistencies and outright lies. There is evidence from other witnesses, including written evidence, which clearly supports that there was one person who was in charge at the time at CBSA, and it was Min Doan who held that position and who ultimately selected GC Strategies. I'm asking you, sir, do you agree with that or not?
I do not agree with that.
Fine. The RCMP, as I said, are investigating this and a number of other issues surrounding the CBSA and other agencies.
Okay, so I just want to comment on this again because I haven't seen everything that Mr. Brock has, obviously. He's seen far more than I have. However, we can only comment on what we've heard at committee and what we've seen. What I've seen and from what I've heard, assuming that Cameron McDonald is telling the truth.
That's a pretty big assumption.
Okay, and let's assume that Utano is telling the truth.
Also a big assumption.
Even though their truths conflict. Assuming they're telling the truth, Min Doan was not provided a reasonable choice. Again, when you were provided one option that there's a path forward on and another option that there is no path forward on, then there really is no other choice, is there? It's like saying you have two choices in order to drive home to your house. One choice is a bridge that is blocked, or the other choice is a bridge that is unblocked. What do you choose? Well, you're not going to choose the bridge that's blocked, are you? That would be a silly decision. So you're going to resort to the only choice that you really have left. Now, based on what McDonald and Utano have put forward in their testimony, they are saying that the only choice was GC Strategies, because they're saying, and again, this is just if they are telling the truth. Recall that they said that McDonald had stayed up all night preparing a proposal for Deloitte, and Utano had been preparing a proposal for GC Strategies. And then McDonald went in and said, here you go, Doan. Here's the Deloitte. Here's the GC Strategies. And knowingly, Deloitte was allegedly in this penalty box. And Deloitte was then disqualified from the process. So therefore, you only have one choice left, which is GC Strategies. So now, Min Doan's position is, my technical direction was this needed to be a not wholly outsourced solution. This needed to be a quote-unquote internally managed solution. So if, again, it's the same scenario. Deloitte would have been completely outsourced. So that was a non-option. So either way, Min Doan was presented an option in Deloitte that was not an option to be selected in the first place. So the lack of choice is not a choice. You can't necessarily say that the decision was Min Doan's. The accountability is Min Doan's, 100%. But the decision on what to put forward to Min Doan to decide, that was not up to Min Doan. That was up to, who was it? Cameron McDonald and Tony Utano. Cameron McDonald, the guy who's buddy-buddy with Christian Firth. So that's my comment on this. So I don't necessarily agree, with what Brock and the Conservatives are putting forward here. But again, they've seen more than I have.
Has the RCMP contacted you, sir? No, I have not. Have they requested any documentation from you?
Mr. Chair, no, they have not.
Will you cooperate with them when and if they decide to talk to you?
Mr. Chair, absolutely.
The president of the CBSA, Aaron O'Gorman, appeared 2 days ago and was quite clear that there was only one casual employee contract that was offered to you, and that was in relation to the one-day contract that we spoke about. But that's not accurate. That's not accurate at all. In fact, you've received more than one contract since you left the CBSA. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chair, the initial contract that occurred was for my appearance on January 18th. After we closed out that contract, I was invited back to OGO in February, but it didn't work out for scheduling reasons. And so that contract was restarted. So under her, I believe what she said, under her tenure, it's only happened once, and maybe it was just referring to me once, but in fact there was two separate contracts. And they're not, actually, I think I would just clarify, they're not contracts. I'm on casual employment status.
Did you in fact sign a contract in relation to your appearance today?
I signed a casual employment letter of offer.
Okay, and how much are you receiving?
Nothing.
Nothing. All right. Now, in relation to the documentation, you claim you only accessed your emails and your calendars. But again, that's not accurate because you had access literally to everything at the CBSA surrounding this scandal. Isn't that correct, sir?
I guess, Mr. Chair, notionally, I guess that would be the case. But
right.
You've asked the department for records of what I've accessed, and I think you'll find it underwhelming.
Well, Ms. O'Gorman was asked the question 2 days ago, what documentation did you receive? She very curtly said, well, I don't know, you have to ask Mr. Ossowski. So we're asking you, isn't it true that Ms. O'Gorman actually furnished you with a number of documents in relation to your committee's appearances, including the statement of allegations against Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano?
Mr. Chair, Ms. O'Gorman has personally not provided me with any information, and I have never seen the statement of fact or allegations against Mr. Utano or Mr. McDonald.
So if there were emails from Ms. O'Gorman to you, including attachments with documentation regarding the statement of fact against Mr. McDonald, Mr. Utano, you would disagree with the existence of an email. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I have no knowledge of any emails from Ms. O'Gorman
That is your
about
time,
the
Mr.
statement
Brock.
of fact or allegations.
That's very interesting. Brock either knows something or he's highly speculating. So it seems to be that he's insinuating that Aaron O'Gorman sent John Ossowski the allegations as a result of the internal investigation from the CBSA against Cameron McDonald and Tony Utano that led to their suspension. That would be something if Aaron O'Gorman did that, because she's not allowed to do that, because Mr. Ossowski is not a direct employee by the government anymore. And number two, that's protected information. She can't do that. So that would be very interesting if that was actually the case.
Next up, Ms. Block, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, I echo my colleagues' comments when it comes to the fact that it is absolutely mind-boggling to have the former president of the CBSA state he remains proud of the work his department undertook when it is actually the CBSA that has served as a bellwether for the complete debacle we are studying now, known as ARRIVESCAM, and all of the other issues that have started to arise when it comes to procurement and contracting across all departments in the Government of Canada. I'm going to circle back to some of the questions my colleague Mr. Barrett asked, just to make sure that I heard your answers correctly, Mr. Ossowski. When appearing before the Government Operations and Estimates Committee, and I'll start by restating, the umbrage you seem to have taken or are taking with the fact that individuals have accused you of lying when you came to committee. And yet when you appeared before the Government Operations and Estimates Committee, you did lie about ever meeting Christian Firth. You did not say, I do not recall, when the question was asked of you. You gave a definitive no. And we have that in the testimony. And as we know, at a subsequent meeting, you then corrected the record to say that you had in fact met with him. You stated that you were able to make the correction because the CBSA paid you to provide you with a document stating that you had in fact held this meeting. And I think most Canadians would find it strange that a former employee gets rehired as a casual employee under a temporary contract to gain access to information needed to correct the record or defend themselves when most people pay to get access to information from the Government of Canada through ATIPs. So from your earlier response, are we to understand that this is a common practice?
Thank you, Ms. Block. Because, yes, we are completely dumbfounded by this whole process to begin with. Why are people, executives, former executives, paid to get access to information in order to then go back to committee and defend themselves at committee? Who else gets that perk? I don't know of anybody. I don't know of anybody who knows anybody. So yeah, that's the question. Is this a common practice? Because clearly the MPs haven't heard about this.
People getting hired to gain access to information so they can defend themselves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Let's be very clear here. When I originally answered no, I testified in December of 2022. I did so without the benefit of any support from the agency. It was based on my recollection. I answered too quickly. I should have gone to the agency afterwards and asked for them to verify my testimony. I didn't. In October of last year...
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, may I finish my answer, please?
No, that is not the answer to the question.
Well, I'm getting to it, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
I did not go back to the agency as a part of a casual contract.
Ms. Block, hold on. I've stopped the clock. So Mr. Ossowski, I know it can be frustrating. The time is for the members. There are other members who are on the, will be asking questions, and I am sure they will allow you to come back to it. So I do recognize that you provided an answer. The time is now, Mrs. Block. I'm going to turn back to that. Point d'ordre? Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, there are interpreters. When there are members speaking, two at a time, that can lead to difficulties for the interpreters.
Order as well to ensure members are not speaking over the interpreters. I know committees can clash, and so I do try to maintain order. So, Ms. Block, you have the floor again for
Thank you very much,
2 minutes and
Mr.
10 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I apologize. I do expect that when a member indicates that they are receiving an answer to a question they did not ask, that the witness would respect that. My question to you, Mr. Ossowski, is this: is it a common practice for individuals to get hired as casual employees under temporary contracts in order to gain access to information they need to defend themselves in front of committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To be clear, I was not on casual employment status in October when I apologized. And yes, it is normal practice for people to be given access to the information through a casual employment. I did that, for example, for the public order inquiry. This is common practice so that people can refresh their memory and provide committees with the most accurate information for their deliberations.
Common practice. This, they need to review that practice then, because that doesn't make any sense. Makes no sense whatsoever. No other company that I would go back to would give me that type of deal.
What's your contact at the CBSA to request these documents from?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't request documents. I requested access to my email. I've given a laptop so I can sign on with my credentials to access my emails and calendar.
Thank you. President O'Gorman stated you had access to all of your emails and any other information you requested. So that is in direct conflict to what you've just stated. You have testified here today that you only accessed information to confirm a meeting, and I'm assuming a calendar. Did it really take you 8 hours to review your calendar event in order to confirm your meeting with Christian Firth?
Good question, Kelly. Good question. Very astute. Yeah, so Ossowski is trying to say, I hardly accessed anything. I was just trying to confirm, a couple of things. I asked, that I was provided with an ATIP. I didn't look at it. So what were you doing for 8 hours? Why did you bill 8 hours of work for $500? What the hell were you doing? Inquiring minds want to know.
Mr. Chair, I already replied that I was not on casual employment status in October when I had that validated around the team's meeting with Christian Firth. So that was just based on me, where I requested documents from the agency to validate that, but I was not on casual employment status at that point in time.
Thank you very much. That is the time.
As always, Kelly Block, she's a phenomenal MP. She has very, very astute questions, very keen observations. She's just really, really good, and no wonder that she's shadow minister for procurement, because she would do dynamite in that position.
Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Did you have access to the binder prepared for CBSA President O'Gorman before her appearance at committee in either an electronic format or in a paper format?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not accessed or seen or been sent any briefing materials for Ms. O'Gorman's use.
Was one offered? Was any of that material offered to you?
In terms of her briefing book?
Any preparation material that was used or designed for the use of the current president of the CBSA?
The only thing that I recall is around our January 18th appearance where we appeared together, we exchanged opening statements in advance.
How far in advance?
I think the day before.
That's interesting. Ms. O'Gorman made a point in her appearance this week of saying that there was no effort for anyone to get their stories straight, but certainly witnesses a former employee of the government and a current head of an agency exchanging opening statements days prior to their appearance at committee looks like exactly that.
It sure does. That's interesting. You know what a controversial issue this is? You have the current president, former president saying, "Hey, what are you saying tomorrow?" Well, I'll show you my statement if you show me your statement. Okay, let's do that, and then maybe we'll make some corrections. Come on.
When you accessed files or resources of the CBSA while in your casual employment status, where did you do that? From what location?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was no intent to get our stories straight. It was a courtesy to share opening remarks.
The question, sir.
The answer to the question is I access these emails in my calendar through a laptop at my home.
Did you attend a CBSA office to receive the laptop or sign the offer of employment?
Yes, I went to the office to receive the laptop and signed my letter of employment.
Which campus?
At the office, the headquarters on Laurier Avenue.
Were you an employee of, PricewaterhouseCoopers on the date that you had access to the CBSA materials? Were you also being paid by PricewaterhouseCoopers on the same day that you were being paid by the Government of Canada?
I don't even remember the exact day that I was billed for, or potentially yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like a yes. We've heard a lot about double dipping, where we have folks who are providing services to the government of Canada while also working for the government of Canada. We know that PricewaterhouseCoopers does hundreds of millions of dollars in business with the government. It's the fact that this is just further evidence of the disregard for the public dollar in the ongoing scandal of double dipping is it's unsurprising, of course, but troubling for Canadians.
I go back to something he said earlier. So he said that there was 2 different occasions that he was under quote unquote casual employee status by the government. The first time he was paid $500. The second time he was paid 0, which is now. Why wasn't he paid now? Same status. What's the difference? Why couldn't he have been paid 0 the first time? That's the other question.
Well, didn't O'Gorman say that she had to put something on the contract, and then one of the MPs asked her, well, why didn't you just write down $1? I think it was Barrett.
Yeah, it was Barrett. It's like, yeah, couldn't $1 have sufficed?
Right, so that was her excuse as to why they couldn't put 0 the first time. Well, we had to write something. So, instead of saying $1, we wrote 500.
Right? It's just, this is just beyond ridiculous.
Said you were proud of ARRIVESCAM. I've talked to frontline border service officers, and I speak to them regularly. I spoke to them during the time that you talk about, the challenging time of 2020, 2021, 2022, and time since then. This cost $60 million, and it wasn't necessary. It absolutely was not necessary. You said that you would have spent more on hiring border service officers if you had money to do it, but you had the money. And the border service officers have been very clear with me that they could have done, with resources made available to them, more than was done with the app, but also been able to do the job that they're there to do, to make sure that the traveling public is safe, to make sure that we have the proper flow of commerce into our country. And they, instead, scammers and grifters were paid. Pools and decks were put on the houses of contractors who added no value to this app, charging 30% commissions and bonuses paid to executives, while border services officers were able to execute on their core function. So to be clear, you're proud of the $60 million price tag on the app.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I take umbrage that I'm being referred to as double dipping to prepare for this committee.
Sir.
And secondly, there was no ongoing source of funds to hire border service officers. And my point in my opening remarks was
Mr. Ossowski, you spent $60 million on this thing. So there were funds. There were funds available. You made a choice, and the choice was to spend it and in the way that you did. And 30% commissions going to people who added no value. You talk about programmers.
Your question, Mr. Barrett.
Christian Firth and Darren Anthony, they're not programmers. But the people who...
question.
Are you proud of doing business with these grifters instead of properly funding frontline border service officers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was no choice at the time to use this but to use this procurement vehicle.
Well, here's the problem, Ossowski. You're the president. You're accountable for that money. You're accountable for that $60 million. And the problem is he has to say, I'm proud. That's his only choice.
Well, because what else are you going to do? Go, no, I'm really upset, and
government sucks.
It's all my fault. Yeah.
Government sucks.
You can't.
Well, he can't.
I mean, I guess theoretically you could, but you wouldn't.
Well, here's the issue, because if he was really against it, then he would have actually stood up and done something, right? He would have actually noticed that this cost was running out of control and maybe put a stop to it. But he didn't. So he has no choice but to say he's proud of it because he let it go. And this is half the problem. This guy's the accountable guy. Buck stops with him in the Canada Border Services Agency.
Do you think it was kind of like death by a thousand cuts, where they're like, oh, we need a little more money and a little more money and a little more money, and it just was small amounts adding up over time that it, I don't want to say went unnoticed, but it didn't seem like a $60 million debacle?
Well, no, because the first one was around 80,000, fine, but then there was another contract that was like 2.3 million.
That's a significant jump.
It's a huge jump.
That's almost 4 times as much.
It's a huge jump. So,
no, sorry, 40 times as much.
And if you're actually tracking this, now, again, contrast this with McDonald and Utano, that there's tons of documentation about this. And this was being project managed. And this was allegedly being project managed by the gentleman that came in with Aaron O'Gorman the other day. But anyway, let's forget that. You should be watching the balance sheet on how this is actually being tracked. But he wasn't. This is negligence by the president. He didn't see this happening, or he saw it and was like, yeah, sure, that's fine, whatever. I spent $300 million on CARM. What's $60 million on ARRIVESCAM?
Next up, we have Mr. Brock for 5 minutes, please.
You said Mindone didn't choose GC Strategies. Who did?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. This has come up multiple times.
Just give me a name, sir.
I think the question, Mr. Chair, is the issue is really who proposed GC
Just
Strategies.
a name, sir. Who ultimately signed off and chose GC Strategies? It's a simple question. I want a simple answer.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Sabero, I believe.
I wanted to get your attention there. I think the line, the tone of questioning from my colleague on the opposition side, we've had a really good meeting to date, and the tone of question, the start off here is kind of veered off somewhere where it's, if I can use the word disrespectful, I think that'd be probably apt.
Well, I don't think it's disrespectful. It's certainly sharp, but that is Mr. Brock's within Mr. Brock's parameters or ability to decide how he'd like to question the witness, but it has certainly been respectful.
Yeah, I just know that Williamson was going to be like, well, that's just Mr. Brock's way.
It is, though.
It is. It's how he gets stuff done. And, why wouldn't he be frustrated? Like 2 years. They've been trying to get straight answers to this very, very easy question. But again, this is where Ossowski he's trying to deflect here. He's trying to say, well, it's not who chose it, it's who proposed it. So he's trying to say, again, well, this was up to McDonald. Now, why wouldn't you just say McDonald's the one who chose GC Strategies? Why do you say McDonald chose GC Strategies? Well, I'm saying McDonald chose GC Strategies because there was only one viable proposal that was actually brought to Mindone. So I would say that McDonald chose... why don't you say that? Why? Because someone would have had to sign off on that decision. So someone has to own that. Someone has to wear egg on their face for that. Who would that be? That would be Mindone. But that doesn't absolve the fact that it's obvious that Cameron McDonald and Utano were working to have GC Strategies be the only option that was selected here.
Mr. Brock, you have 4 minutes, 40 seconds.
What's the name, please?
Mr. Chair, I do not know who chose GC Strategies. The Auditor General is also not able to determine who chose GC Strategies.
Thank you, sir. This is my time. For the record, the president of the CBSA, an extremely large ministry, is unable to give evidence to this committee as to who ultimately chose GC Strategies. That's absolutely incredible, sir. Moving on. I want you to table all emails and attachments sent to you by Aaron O'Gorman since you left the agency within 3 weeks. A document tabled by the CBSA called Lessons...
Hold on. I want to get an acknowledgement from the witness if he's prepared to do that. Generally, and I'm sure you're aware of this, committees can request, or members through committees can request information. Is that something you'd be prepared to provide to us or get back to us on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're asking for all emails that I received from Ms. O'Gorman.
Is that correct, Mr. Brock? I have stopped the clock.
Emails, all attachments, any other pieces of
I think that's clear.
correspondence since you left the agency.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brock, you have 4 minutes.
Now, there's a document that came out of the Auditor General's report from the CBSA called Lessons Learned. A highlight and a conclusion of that document indicates that a central governance authority was needed. You previously said that you briefed ministers and cabinet during your tenure as president. Did you raise that issue with them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of the document that Mr. Block is referring to.
I'm asking about the concept of a central governance authority. Did you raise that with ministers and cabinet?
I have no recollection of raising that with ministers or cabinet.
Did you advocate for this?
Mr. Chair, I don't even know what the reference is without looking at the document and seeing how it's been explained.
If it's not you and if it's not current President or Gorman, who is it?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to review the document if the member would like to provide it to me.
Is it likely the Minister of Public Safety?
Again, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to review the document if the member would provide it to me.
Given everything that has transpired with this scandal, do you think it's highly appropriate for this committee, if not other committees, to have former Minister of Public Safety Marco Mendicino testify on these issues?
Mr. Chair, I have no opinion on what the committee chooses to do in terms of who it calls for witnesses.
Do you think he has relevant information?
Mr. Chair, I have no comment on who would provide relevant
Well, Marco
information.
Mendicino essentially said to Mindone that someone's head should be on a platter with respect to the controversy surrounding GC strategies. Were you aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe those comments and that testimony happened after I left the agency.
All right. Now, are you surprised? I know how proud you are of the work that you did and the value that you claim that was delivered to Canadians against the backdrop of all the scandals, against the backdrop of a very damning Auditor General report about the mismanagement at the CBSA under your leadership. Are you actually surprised now that the RCMP is actively investigating not only the ARRIVESCAM debacle, but circumstances surrounding GC strategies?
Mr. Chair, I look forward to the outcome of the RCMP's investigation.
The question is, are you surprised? Do you think it's appropriate that the RCMP is investigating criminality surrounding ARRIVESCAM contracting under your leadership and the very fraudulent and forged practices exhibited by GC strategies? Does it surprise you?
Mr. Chair, I think that an unbiased, thoughtful, fulsome investigation is warranted.
Wow. I understand that Ossowski has to be very careful with this response, but I don't think it's inappropriate for if he would have said, I'm shocked, unless that opens him up for additional questions of, well, why would you be shocked? Weren't you looking into it? So that may have actually been a no-win scenario type of a question where whatever answer he provided, it would make him look terrible, because he already looks terrible. Because again, this is either a massive project that went on without him paying attention whatsoever, without him asking any questions whatsoever, or he knew everything that was going on and allowed it to continue. That's kind of the options that I see here.
How much time do I have left, Chair?
Just under a minute.
The Procurement Ombudsman found that Justin Trudeau's government favored McKinsey Contracting, a Liberal-connected firm with over $100 million in government contracts. In one case, the CBSA saw that McKinsey had not applied for a contract under your leadership, sir, so the CBSA revised the statement of work with no documentation explanation allowing McKinsey to qualify. Were you part of that decision?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no recollection of being involved in the contracting around McKinsey.
Okay. How many millions of dollars under your leadership was awarded to McKinsey?
Mr. Chair, I have no recollection of how much was spent with McKinsey.
Okay. Will you table that information? Will you ask Aaron O'Gorman to assist you in tabling that information?
I think that question is better posed to the department, to the agency.
Would you, I'm putting it to you, sir, because I don't know when Ms. O'Gorman is attending again. Will you undertake to speak with Ms. O'Gorman, because the McKinsey contracts were under your leadership? Will you undertake to speak with her and give this committee a number of how many millions of dollars in contracts under your leadership was awarded McKinsey contracting? Perhaps ask
Thank
for,
you,
perhaps ask for
Mr. Brock. Hold on, Mr.
contract.
Brock. Just hold on. Your time is up. I gave you more time because you're trying to get information.
Thank you.
I allowed that. I will allow the witness to answer, and then we'll go to Ms. Yep. But
I am here as an individual. I'm sure Ms. O'Gorman has officials watching the testimony today and taking note of the request.
Anyway, so, ladies and gentlemen, that was the highlights of what happened at the Standing Committee of Public Accounts with John Ossowski. No, the interesting thing is Diane Daly, everyone remembers her. She was the name dropped at the bar by Christian Firth when he was admonished and questioned by the House. And she, as we've seen through our exploration into the Bottler investigation, she was a key figure here. And it was also responded that she was the one that assisted in doctoring up the contract according to GC Strategy's qualifications so that they would be the only one eligible for the ARRIVESCAM contract. She was supposed to testify on Thursday. She did not. It was very interesting that she did not. Curious.
Yeah, she seems like a key player in all of this.
Absolutely.
I mean, she was the one who canceled Bottler's contract, did she not?
Yeah. She's the one who, on her own, canceled Bottler's contract. Because Bottler wanted to get out from under the corrupt scheme of Dalian and GC Strategies. Diane Daly wouldn't let her do it.
And if I recall correctly, Bottler reported the misconduct to Diane Daly directly, did they not?
Correct. Her and Utano. Little did they know the involvement that Diane Daly and Tony Utano had in this whole mess. So we still don't know the full extent of Diane Daly's involvement in this. All we do know is she was working pretty close with Cameron McDonald on this. But I'm sure that we're going to hear from Miss Diane Daly in the future, because this is one witness that I think is going to force the next set of cards to fall in this house of cards. Because you already have Christian Firth and Darren Anthony. They are neck deep.
Yeah, they've already folded.
And you have McDonald and Utano kind of holding on for dear life, praying that this just passes over them. But if they get Diane Daly in, and if she cracks, I have a feeling this whole thing is going to come falling down.